The shocking biblical fate of Venezuela revealed. What Scripture says about our future now. The skies over Caracas rumbled with a ferocity that sent chills down spines. Dark clouds swirled ominously, as if nature itself was displeased with what was unfolding below. News reports flickered on screens, the predictions of ancient prophecies piercing through the static. This wasn't just a weather anomaly. It was something deeper, something sinister. In the streets, whispers spread like wildfire. Mothers clutched their children tighter, eyes wide with a fear that seemed almost palpable, as if they could sense the weight of history looming over them. That a thick haze descended around the once vibrant city, enveloping it in a shroud of uncertainty. The air was thick with the smell of impending rain, mixed with a hint of sulfur, igniting panic. People crowded the plazas, their voices a mix of confusion and dread. What did the old texts say? Were these the signs that foretold the darkness to come? As the ground rumbled beneath their feet, an old man recalled passages that spoke of doom and despair, and the crowd listened, spellbound. Disbelief twisted into a collective fear as they tried to connect the dots to their own fate. Days earlier, a stranger dressed in tattered clothes appeared, claiming to be a prophet. He preached on street corners, his voice cutting through the noise with startling clarity. These are the days of reckoning, he proclaimed, eyes blazing with fervor. He spoke of a reckoning that would be swift and merciless, predicting that the heart of Venezuela would be tested. It was surreal. That drifter exuding conviction felt both like a beacon of hope and a harbinger of doom, stirring unease within every heart present. Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button. It really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The crowd stood on edge, hearts racing as the air thickened with tension. Can you imagine being caught in the middle of such chaos? A woman began to cry out, "It's happening! It's all happening!" Her hands trembled as she clutched a faded Bible. The feeling among the people shifted suddenly. Their anxiety became tangible. The old man began to reread passages, his voice dropping to a whisper, as if sharing the grim predictions were sealing their fate. What would come next? Underneath all their fear, hope flickered dimly, a desperate wish that perhaps, just perhaps, there might still be a way to change the course of destiny. The ground beneath them shook again, louder this time, and the questions loomed larger than ever. What future awaited them? And were they truly powerless? The thick haze turned into a choking mist as the trembling hands of the crowd reached towards the heavens, desperate for a sign. The old man's voice steadied, cutting through the noise. "We are standing on the precipice," he warned, his eyes wide, echoing the sentiment of 1,000 fearful hearts. "Turn your eyes to the skies. The prophecies linger just above us." Above them, the dark clouds twisted violently, and a low roar filled the air. It felt as if the entire universe held its breath. The panic among the people ignited into utter frenzy. Shouts of fear, prayers, and cries of despair mixed into an unbearable cacophony. "They're coming," a man screamed, clutching his child close to his chest. In that moment, the first raindrop fell, a violent splash that sent a shiver through the crowd. It wasn't pure water. It was a bitter ash that melted on contact with their skin. Gasps erupted, and then silence fell, heavy and thick, as they opened their mouths to the dark sky. "Is this the beginning of our end?" A woman sobbed, gazing into the eyes of those around her, searching for reassurance that never came. The crowd began to sway like reeds in a storm, pushed and pulled by fear and uncertainty. People glanced at one another, an unspoken agreement building among them. They needed answers, they needed hope, but who among them could provide it? Suddenly, The prophet stepped forward. His figure remained unmoved, even as the ground trembled beneath him. "Oh, children of Venezuela," he cried, voice booming over the crowd like a thunderclap. "This path is not chosen. Your prayers can shift the winds of fate, but you must take action." A spark ignited in the depths of despair. Those words clawed at the hearts of the people. Could it be true? Could they still turn the tide? A man near the front spoke hoarsely. "What must we do?" His eyes showed determination, a glimmer in the stormy night. Then came a sound unlike any other. It reverberated through the air, an ominous growl that resonated from deep within the earth itself. The crowd felt it in their bones, a fearsome entity awakening beneath them. What was that? Someone yelled, eyes wide with shock. The prophet turned solemn, the kind of gravity hanging over his face that made even the bravest souls hesitate. "It is the awakening of the secrets buried long ago," he said, "and it seeks you. Are you ready to stand before it?" People exchanged frantic glances, weighing the truth of his words. Would they unite, or would they bow to the chaos? Then, as if the world could sense their collective uncertainty, the ground shuddered violently, sending tremors up their spines. A crack opened nearby, sharp and vast, as blackness unfolded beneath. Gasps filled the air, and the prophet raised his voice high. "This is your test. Look within your hearts. Do you have the courage to confront the dark?" Panic surged again. Faces reflected uncertainty amidst the shadows creeping toward them. It was a moment that would change everything. The weight of their fate hung in the balance, the pressure building to a breaking point. But just as the tension reached its peak, the rumble faded to an eerie silence, leaving a haunting echo in its wake. The crack widened, revealing a blinding light below the kind that promised both salvation and destruction. "Will you leap?" he asked, his eyes fixed upon the abyss, challenge igniting in every syllable. The crowd held its breath, poised on the edge of destiny, unsure of their choice. What lay beyond that light? And who would dare to step forward into the unknown? With hearts racing and uncertainty swirling in their minds, the people teetered on the brink. Would they choose to confront the darkness or retreat into fear? The answer loomed nearer than ever a decision awaited them. What would it reveal? And would they be ready for the truth that lay beyond the shadows? The silence shattered as a man took a step forward, determination etched deep into his features. "I will leap," he declared, his voice a raw cut against the quiet like thunder cracking open the sky. The crowd shifted, whispering among themselves, a wave of uncertainty pulsing through the throng. "Be cautious," someone whispered, glancing nervously at the widening chasm. "What if it's a trap?" But the prophet nodded. "Bravery is not without risk." His words pushed against the tide of fear, planted firm like roots in the shaking ground. Eyes turned toward the man, a stranger in the crowd, suddenly transformed into an emblem of hope. "What will you find?" Another voice called, catching the nervous electricity hanging in the air. Gulping down his trepidation, the man inched closer, the crack gaping beneath him like a hungry maw. The blinding light beckoned. It was a siren-esque call. With trembling hands, he raised them high, signaling to everyone around him. "Watch." Then, with a deep breath that seemed to steal the air from the crowd, he leaped. Time slowed as his figure soared towards the luminance, fading into the radiance that consumed him. Gasps echoed, and the weight of dread settled hard in their chests as they awaited the inevitable. Would he return? The seconds stretched, each tick of the unseen clock dragging before them, morphing fear into agony, and then nothing. A heavy stillness filled the void where hope had danced. Was it all for nothing? The crowd collectively held their breath, eyes glued to the spot where he vanished. "Stop!" the prophet shouted, his voice breaking the cries of despair. "Do not lose faith. His choice will not go unanswered." But a deep tremor rippled beneath their feet again, far stronger than before. The ground trembled as if protesting the stillness, awakening a pulse of energy fed by their collective fear. The hairs on the back of necks bristled, and panic flared like wildfire again. "What is happening?" A woman screamed, clutching her child yet again, eyes darting around wildly. From the depths of the crack, the ground split wider, releasing tendrils of fissured light that swirled like smoke, coiling around the crowd. They stepped back, hearts pounding, confused by the sensation of warmth and cold washing over them like a tidal wave. Suddenly, from the bank of light emerged a figure. It was the man, shining with the brilliance of 1,000 suns. He was changed, something profound emanated from him, a glint of knowledge caught in his wide-eyed gaze. "Have you seen the truth?" the prophet shouted, urging him to speak while the air crackled with anticipation. The radiant man opened his mouth, but no words escaped as his face twisted in painful struggle. The vibrant colors around him dimmed, shifting subtly to a colder hue, creating a stark contrast against the once hopeful atmosphere. "What is it?" the crowd urged, desperation clawing at their hearts. "What did you see?" As the crowd leaned in, breathless, a piercing scream erupted from the depths of the ground, drowning their questions in chaos. The intensity rose sharply as shadows spilled from the light, swirling menacingly around the gathered souls. "Run!" someone shouted. Panic ignited as people dove towards safety, the tale of courage spiraling into a nightmare. But the prophet remained, eyes locked on the transformed man, now trapped in the shifting shadows before them, fight twisting on his face. "What truth do you bear?" the prophet rasped, desperation evident in his voice. The figure's eyes widened in terror, the walls of darkness encroaching rapidly, swallowing the light and the man whole, leaving a smoldering silence behind. And in that terrifying moment, a loud rumbling echoed once more, but this time from a different direction, a sound they all recognized as approaching footsteps. What awaited them beyond the echoes? Would anyone have the strength to confront the shadows? The crowd erupted into a frenzy, the weight of fear and confusion spiraling out of control. People stumbled, their hearts racing as they backed away from the writhing shadows. Whispers of panic filled the air, punctuated by the shouts of the fearful. "Who is coming?" someone shrieked, terror drenching every syllable. The prophet strained to see, brows furrowed, as the heavy footfalls grew louder, echoing against the jagged ravine. His gut twisted. Whatever approached felt alive, a heartbeat synced with the crowd's escalating terror. From the dust and shadows emerged a phalanx of figures, their faces obscured by hoods that cast deep shadows down their features. Eyes glowed like embers in the dark, and a chill swept over the crowd as realization dawned. They were not mere spectators. They were targets. "Stay together," the prophet urged, but his voice was nearly drowned out by the surge of chaos. It was as if the ground itself had turned against them, cracks, spiderwebbing beneath their feet. A young woman clutched her child tighter, pressing her face to its tousled hair. "What do we do?" she demanded, panic flooding her tone. The prophet stepped forward, grounding himself. "We face them. We do not back down. This is our home." Deep inside him, a fire ignited. Fear had lost its way. It was time to reclaim hope. The strangers advanced, their movements synchronizing eerily, like a predator closing in on its prey. The crowd recoiled, pressing backward, uncertainty flooding their every instinct. Then, the first figure spoke, their voice hollow and echoing from the depths. "You welcome the light, yet still you fear the dark. What do you want?" demanded a man from the back, fists clenched. "To reveal the truth," the figure replied, pulling back their hood. The crowd gasped as the face of the radiant man from before was revealed, yet it looked different now. The glow that once shimmered was replaced by a sharp, cold gaze that pierced through the frantic air. "You'll wish you hadn't," beckoned the light. The echoes of gasps turned to whimpers, the unsteady vibrations of dread spiraling higher. "What have you seen?" asked the prophet, stepping closer, searching for a glint of hope in those familiar eyes. But the man's mouth twisted into a grim smile. "What I saw had a price, and you will pay it." As shadows reeled, snaking down from the crags above, each person felt the grasp of dread tighten around their throats. The shimmering tendrils of darkness crept forward, hungry and relentless. "No," a voice cried out. "We summoned you to help us." The laughter that followed was chilling, weaving through the crowd like a serpent. "Help? No, my dear. You stumbled into a game far greater than your understanding. Then we will fight." The prophet shouted, raising his arms in defiance. "Whatever you are, whatever power you hold, we will not cower." Yet the ground convulsed as if to mock his bravery, sending shockwaves through their feet that made everyone stumble. The darkness swirled higher, enveloping the figure of the man, now twisted in agony, an echo of the truth they all feared to face. Suddenly, the air thickened as light surged from the center of the chasm, battling against the encroaching shadows. Caught in between, a flicker of hope ignited within the crowd. Could they find the strength to counter the dark forces that sought to claim them? But before anyone could respond, a piercing scream erupted from the chasm's depths, louder than the last, striking like lightning through the rallying flicker of hope. They all turned, hearts racing. Was it a voice from the light or an echo of despair? What vital truth had the man grasped before the shadows swallowed him whole? Time held its breath, waiting for someone to make the next move, on the brink of an uncertain fate. The ground shook again, fierce and unyielding, as the crowd stood frozen, their minds ablaze with disbelief. The scream echoed on, a blood-curdling wail that clawed at the very edges of their sanity, reverberating through the shadows that threatened to consume them. "Get back!" the prophet shouted, gesturing desperately to the people around him, urging them to retreat further away from the edge. His heart raced as the figures continued to advance, their movements deliberate, almost ritualistic. They were orchestrating fear like a twisted symphony, and he could feel its notes vibrating in the marrow of his bones. The man near the front, eyes wide with terror, held up a burning torch, its flames flickering uncertainly in the gusting wind. "What do they want from us?" he cried, his voice choking with despair. "Answers," the prophet replied, raw determination slicing through his panic. "They want us to question what we believe." He could feel the weight of their hopes pressing heavily on him, but he couldn't let them see his faltering resolve. The lead figure, still cloaked in darkness, stepped forward, unfurling a hand as if to draw them in. "Your future is intertwined with the fabric of the cosmos," he said, voice dripping with malice. "Light and dark dance in an eternal struggle. You've called for illumination, but the truth is not what you think." A woman screamed as a shadow detached from the wall of darkness, slithering like liquid ink. It reached for her, tendrils wrapping around her ankle, dragging her closer to the void. The crowd gasped, horror setting fire to the air. "Help her!" someone yelled, the desperation echoing in the growing chaos. People rushed forward, but there was too much fear, too much uncertainty. The shadows shimmered, taunting them as hope flickered and waned. With a primal roar, the prophet surged forward, his hands outstretched. "Release her," he bellowed, pouring every ounce of his will into the words as though they were a physical force. The shadows hissed in response, recoiling from his challenge, but the woman writhed in agony. Suddenly, the radiant man's lips peeled back in a wicked grin. "You're brave," he said, "but bravery will not shield you from the truth. Would you like to see it for yourself?" The ground quaked violently as part of the chasm cracked open further, revealing a swirling abyss from which shadows whispered chilling secrets. An unnatural light pulsed within, revealing blurred images that flickered like broken memories. A city torn apart, families separated, souls lost in despair. "No," the prophet shouted, turning his back on the wretched scenes. But the viewer's eyes were drawn against their will. He could feel the weight of his people's despair as they glimpsed their own fates mirrored within the dark. "See how your light has turned to ash," the figure hissed, reveling in their agony. "You believed salvation was free, but every gift carries the cost." A collective gasp rippled through the crowd, and for a moment, hearts hung heavy with realization. They had asked for truth, but what truth lay in the shadows? "Fight it," the prophet implored, the words clawing at his throat like jagged glass. see through their lies. But doubt crept in, filling the gaps where hope once resided. Would they rise against the encroaching darkness, or would they succumb to despair? The line between light and shadow blurred, and fear threatened to overtake them as the shadows writhed with malicious glee. A low growl emanated from the chasm, sending shivers up spines. Would they stand together, or would fear fracture them into faceless dust? Time shimmered, each second stretching into infinity, holding its breath. The last echoes of courage hung above them, waiting for a single spark, and then, through the darkness, a new sound emerged, sharp, crystalline, like breaking glass. It resonated with a clarity that punched through the fear, awakening something deep inside. What could this new source of light mean? The crowd turned as one, straining to see through the chaos what awaited them on the other side of fear. Would it be salvation or something far more sinister? As the piercing sound cut through the tension like a knife, every eye shifted, intent on the shimmering beacon emerging from beyond the engulfing darkness. The atmosphere hummed, charged with the promise of the unknown. The mere act of focusing on that light seemed to douse some of the fear that had gripped the crowd, at least momentarily. "What is it?" A voice trembled from the back, uncertain yet laced with hope. "What do you see?" The prophet's heart raced as he fought to push through the waves of dread. The light danced, swirling like a vortex, and his instincts warned him. This could either be salvation or a deeper trap. In a flash, a figure stepped out from the brilliance of woman, luminous and radiant, her long hair flowing as though tangled in the very essence of light. She wore tattered garments, a stark contrast to her ethereal glow, and her eyes held an ancient wisdom. "Fear not," she called, her voice sweet yet raspy as though it had weathered storms. "I bring a message, a warning." Gasps erupted from the crowd, both electrifying and terrifying. The shadows seemed to shrink back, momentarily startled by her presence. "What do you know of our fate?" The prophet urged, steadiness clinging to his voice despite the tremors beneath. "They seek to devour your spirit, to lead you into despair," she replied, lifting her hands as if to envelope them all. "You have the power to break the cycle. You must choose between light and darkness, destruction and rebirth." The radiant figure moved closer, her light illuminating anguished faces. There was something almost hypnotic about her, drawing them in, yet a sliver of caution wormed its way through the prophet's heart. "But how?" a woman cried, clutching her child. "How do we fight this?" "By recognizing the light within you," she answered. "It flickers, but it does not burn out. Gather your strength, ignite the will to rise." The shadows began to writhe again, hissing in unison, cutting through her words. The lead figure stepped forward, his grin widening, eyes narrowing like a predator's. "Such pretty promises," he taunted. "But what can you possibly do against the inevitable?" The prophet stepped between the luminous figure and the encroaching darkness, defiantly raising his own hands. "We can stand united. We will not bow to despair." His voice boomed, filled with fervor. "Fool!" the shadowed leader sneered. "You really think unity can shield you from the reality of your fate? Show them, brothers." Suddenly, shadows lunged forward again, tendrils reaching for the crowd, snaking around legs and waistlines, pulling them toward the void. Shrieks broke the air, fear cascading like a wild river. "Fight!" the prophet roared, rushing back into the fray, heart pounding. He could feel their terror, his own flickering responses battling against the swell of despair. Remember her words, "Ignite the light." But as desperation painted their faces and fears threatened to split them apart, the wavelength of unity fractured. Some were gripped by the shadows, while others remained paralyzed, caught between allegiance to the darkness and the fading call of hope. The radiant woman stepped closer to the prophet, her voice filled with energy. "You have to show them. You must rally your people against the abyss. The fight begins with belief. Can you spark that fire?" His heart thundered in response, uncertainty battling against a rapidly rising determination in his chest. What if his words were not enough? What if they were lost already? The ground trembled, rising in anticipation of the unknown. In the distance, beyond the crack in the earth, whispers transformed into a roar, a tide of shadow and light colliding ominously. And just as the prophet opened his mouth to motivate the dwindling faith around him, an explosion of light erupted from the chasm, a blinding surge that shattered the encroaching darkness. Could this be their last chance? Or was it simply the false promise of a deeper deception? As the shadows recoiled, the crowd braced tight against their fears, and the brilliant surge beckoned them. Would they have the courage to embrace the light rising just before them, or would they be turned away by the darkness lurking behind? The brilliant light surged, flooding the dark landscape with warmth, pushing back the encroaching shadows. Gasps of unmixed with terror filled the air, pulsating like an electric current through the crowd. The prophet felt it too, a shimmer of hope sparked within him, but doubt nibbled at the edges. Could their moment of clarity persist? The luminous woman wasn't finished. Her voice rose above the chaos, cascading over the people like a tide. This is but the beginning. Each flicker of light ignites, more breathe it in. She gestured, beckoning them with open arms, her eyes shining like beacons themselves, but the shadows were not finished yet. They twisted and coiled with increasing ferocity, ignoring the light, thirsting for despair. Fools! The shadowed leader bellowed, his laughter echoing against the rock walls. Light cannot exist without darkness. You'll see, soon enough. The anger in his voice was palpable, crackling like a dry branch before fire. Hold! The prophet yelled, his body tense and ready. Do not listen. Fight back. He could feel the passion in every heartbeat, able to push against the fear constricting him like a vice. A collective murmur bubbled up from the people. Some were still frozen, trapped in confusion, while others took glances at the radiant woman, their eyes flickering with uncertain determination. The prophet could sense the divide, a knife wound slicing through their collective spirit. Let her light guide you, he shouted, the words tumbling out like an overflowing dam, powerful and desperate. He reached for the nearest man, a farmer with grit written into the lines of his weathered face. You remember the stories, don't you? They spoke of light defeating darkness. Let that faith fill you. The man faltered, eyes glistening with the weight of his own struggles, but then a flicker danced in his expression. He raised his chin, emboldened by the prophet's call, and took a step toward the radiant figure. The woman smiled softly. Together, you will shine and grow brighter, engulfing the darkness. Then came a rumble. The earth quaked beneath them. Panic spread like wildfire as the ground cracked again, this time with guttural intensity. The shadows shrieked in rage, clawing at the frantic crowd, desperate to snatch away their growing hope. The prophet felt his heart pound. This is the moment. We stand together. He reached out to more souls, pulling them towards the light. Look around you. See your neighbors, your loved ones. You are not alone. United, we can overpower this darkness. Within a heartbeat, the tide began to shift. Hands grabbed other hands, and more voices joined the prophet's chant. We will not succumb. The luminous woman wove through them, casting shimmering light that illuminated faces once darkened by despair. The shadows shrieked once more, their forms flickering in uncertainty as they recoiled against the growing radiance. A warmth surged through the crowd. Hearts thundered in unison, igniting an unquenchable fire. The prophet could feel it, their unity, their strength woven tightly together. Now, channel your light. Let break the dark. Stand tall. The ground beneath them stilled, swallowed by the clash of shadow and light. The previously ominous chasm began to pulse, illuminating with a divine resonance. The radiant woman raised her arms higher, as if cracking the very sky above. Then, a deafening roar echoed, splitting the air. The luminous energy condensed into a blinding sphere, expanding outward, purging the shadows who writhed in agony before being engulfed. But suddenly, silence fell. The crowd froze, breath caught in their throats. Where once shadows had danced, now there was a void, heavy and ominous. Had they truly vanquished the darkness, or was something more sinister preparing to rise from the depths? The prophet clenched his jaw, searching the faces around him. Stay vigilant. This is not, yet over a shiver coursed through him an unsettling sense that something was about to unfold. And just as he spoke, from the edge of the chasm, a pulse resonated, an echo of terrible energy that seemed to merge with the earth. Then came the voice, all too familiar and dripping with contempt. Did you really think it was over? As the oppressive presence began to form again, the crowd shivered, eyes wide with fear. What horror awaited them beyond the veil of defeat? Were they truly strong enough to confront what lay ahead? A deep, haunting laugh filled the air, curling around them like smoke. The shadows roiled, swirling faster, tighter. Flickers of light, once vibrant, began to waver, dimming as dread seeped through the crowd. The prophet's heart raced. Stay together. Trust in the light. But doubt was like an undercurrent, gnawing at their resolve. The more the ominous figure loomed, the more they quaked. The woman, once an unyielding beacon, faltered as the shadows encroached. He watched her brilliance flicker, struggles etched across her face, reflecting his own fear. From the depths, the shadowed leader stepped forward, eyes gleaming with malice. Did you think mere flickers of hope could extinguish my power? His voice dripped like poison, invading minds, seeping doubt, whispering fear. You were wrong to believe in the light. It is but a fleeting illusion. As the crowd's murmurs turned to cries of panic, the prophet surged forward, desperation pushing him. No, stand firm, or we'll be swallowed. Amplify the light within you. It cannot die as long as we believe. But outside their circle of light, shadows grasped at the edges, clawing desperately for the spark of hope that ignited their spirit. He could see friends, neighbors, the fear in their eyes threatening to choke out light with despair. It wasn't just the shadows now. They faced a relentless tide, a wave of darkness threatening to crash down upon them. Suddenly, the radius of their light dimmed drastically, swallowed whole by the oppressive cloak of shadow. The crowd gasped as the ground quaked violently once more, fissures appearing like open mouths ready to devour them all. Look, a woman cried, pointing towards the chasm. Deep within, a menacing glow began to coalesce, sinister and taunting, mirroring their radiance but dripping with malicious intent. The prophet's pulse quickened. This could mean it's not just darkness, it could be the birth of something worse. Fear shot through them, palpable and tight, yet he refused to let it take hold of him. We have to fight. Look inwards. Draw on everything that makes you shine. Each flicker counts. We need it. Their voices intermingled, a shaky but building chant. A wave surged through the crowd, a glimmer of defiance against the vast canyon of despair. The luminous woman held her arms wide, a shield of desperate hope, and the earth beneath them began to thrum with energy, a heartbeat of possibility. Yet that gleam was short-lived. The shadows resonated back, a thunderous roar that rattled the earth, as the figures began to shift and merge, taking the forms of their deepest fears, faces of loved ones twisted into masks of sorrow. No, not this. A man howled, recoiling as he clutched his partner. We can't let them in. The prophet's resolve hardened. Look, they're feeding on your fear. Don't give in. But the reality crashed over them, despair pooling in their hearts. The cries escalated, drowning out his voice, lost in the storm of twisting shadows that devoured hope whole. As the swirling mass of darkness surged forth, claws reaching, he felt a terrible weight settling on his chest, squeezing tighter, fear threatening to shatter their fragile light. Then, just as the shadows descended like a storm, a light burst forward, different, sharp, electric. It surged from the depths of the chasm, a brilliant, blinding pulse that cut sharply through the darkness. Wait, he shouted. What is that? What do we awaken? The ground moaned, and the world spun as figures from the light began to rise an armada of spectral beings radiating hope that promised to bolster their wavering strength. But with it came uncertainty, a haunting question lingering in the air. Had they summoned their salvation or unleashed an even darker fate? As the specters converged, the prophet's heart sank. Each second stretched. This was only the beginning, and the crowd stared in a mix of awe and trepidation. What emerged from the light might not be what they imagined. Was it a glimmer of salvation, or a herald of overwhelming doom? Would they embrace the unknown or be consumed by what they feared? The radiant figures emerged from the blinding light, floating ethereally, their forms shifting and swirling like mist caught in the wind. Fear mingled with awe as the crowd fell silent, entranced by the sight. But the prophet felt a shiver crawl up his spine, an unsettling sensation like icy fingers trailing down his back. "Are they here to help us?" Someone whispered, voice trembling. The specters moved closer, their forms swirling with shadows that seemed to dance around them, darkness reaching, tugging at the edges of the glowing beings. The prophet's heart thudded heavily in his chest. Each flicker of light might be snuffed out by the very shadows they feared. "Hold fast," he shouted, straining to rally his spirit, gripping the invisible thread of hope in his heart. "Do not let them consume your light. Whatever they are, we have to believe in our own strength." The luminous woman stepped beside him, standing firm. "We are not alone in this fight. Our light connects us all." She raised her arms again, and a bright pulse flashed, drawing more spirits forth from the chasm, a howl rippling through the air as they were pulled into the battlefield, their cries filled with sorrow and rage. The shadows screamed back, an echo of anguish that clawed at their ears. With each stir of the spectral beings, the oppressive darkness tightened its grip, morphing into grotesque forms. Faces they recognized, lost loved ones twisted into soulless visages, taunting and jeering, feeding off the crowd's fear. "No!" A voice roared from the depths of the crowd, a clear, defiant shout. "Face them. We suffer enough. We want to go back to despair." Renewed resolve ignited sparks of courage among them. The prophet felt it too, a fire that began to stir within. "Yes, remember your joys. Remember what you fought for. We are meant to rise." Suddenly, the spectral beings erupted into a kaleidoscope of vivid colors, illuminating the night sky. The prophet shielded his eyes as pure light surged around him, colliding with despair. It was as if each specter had drawn on the memories of every soul present, joy, laughter, love, a collective strength igniting their powers. "Together," he roared, as the light intensified, swirling and merging with the shadows. But rather than being consumed, the darkness began to flicker and wane. The shadows slashed through with raw fury, twisting and screeching, but there was a new force pushing against it. The prophet could feel their connection, an unbreakable bond that stretched throughout the crowd, anchoring them even as the darkness clawed at their hearts. But just then, an ominous crack split the air. The chasm began to widen, as if the earth itself was trying to swallow their hope whole. A monstrous presence roared from within, the shadows trembling with fear and anger. "Fools!" the dark leader howled. "You think this light can save you? You are the darkness. You belong to me." The prophet's breath caught in his throat. The shadows trembled, but the spectral light shifted, pulsing with unyielding might. It resonated through them, an echo of every person's spirit combined, vibrating in harmony against the encroaching despair. But would that harmony be enough? As the ground shook, threatening to devour them, he felt a sinking fear. What lay beneath this battle? Was there a greater evil waiting to emerge? In that moment, the world around them faded further, and the noise of the crowd distanced into silence, leaving only the harrowing echo of the dark leader's taunts and the prophet's racing heart. The sky darkened even more as the chasm widened. Something malevolent and twisted was rising. Would it consume them all in its hunger? Or could they embrace the light they forged together before it was too late? with the darkness swirling menacingly around them. The crowd felt their hearts race, a thick tension hanging in the air. The tension was alive, crackling like electricity. The prophet stood firm amidst the chaos, eyes locked onto the dark leader's sinister grin. "Together," he shouted, his voice cutting through the fear. "We are more than this darkness. Let your light shine." A flicker of realization washed over the people. Strength was hidden deep in their collective spirit, waiting to be awakened. The luminous woman stepped forward, her eyes glowing fervently with encouragement. "Each one of you holds a piece of power. Each flicker matters." In synchronicity, the crowd began to raise their hands, trembling yet steady. They chanted softly at first, hesitant. "Light, light," as the words filled the space, they began to resonate, melding into a crescendo. The rhythm grew, pounding like a drumbeat through their veins, pumping life back into their resolve. Then, the shadows recoiled, sensing their unity. The prophet could feel the atmosphere shift as their voices grew louder, bravery surging through. "Light, light, light." With every repetition, bursts of energy shot from their hands, mingling with the ethereal glow from the woman. The spirits around them swirled in response, feeding on the energy offered by this newfound belief. They coalesced into a brilliant maelstrom that lit up the sky, illuminating the faces of the terrified crowd. The dark leader sneered, his voice steeped in mockery. "You think you can illuminate the deep?" But the thrumming force of their voices drowned him out. "We will not cower. We will not fall." The shadows writhed against the force of their courage, growing chaotic, unable to maintain their grip. The prophet pressed forward, focused on the source of light pulsating around them. The shadows shrieked, thin tendrils retreating as bright connections sparked across the crowd, igniting a fire that surged through veins, hearts pounding in time. As the harmonics of light began to drown out the darkness, the chasm beneath them vibrated with life, the oppressive presence shifting and swirling dangerously. The prophet took another step forward. What once was darkness must now become strength. Then, with a loud crack, the ground shook violently, but this time it felt different, less like a warning and more like a tremor of liberation. The widened chasm pulsed, revealing glimmers of the warm light previously hidden in the depths, rushing forth to fill the void. Amid the chaos, the radiant woman turned to the crowd. "This is your moment. Draw from each other. Unite your energy, make it a beacon." With synchronized minds and fierce hearts, they focused their collective force toward the abyss, releasing an unwavering wave of light that spiraled forth into the darkness, brightening the rain-soaked air. "Let it break through," the prophet called, his spirit intertwining with theirs. "Let the truth reign in." The chasm roared, shadows screeching in agony as the light pushed against them, inviting warmth into the cold, unfurling darkness. Faces flickered, lost in the process, before bursting forth anew from the contrast. Just then, the figure of the dark leader faltered, and in that moment, the shadows began to dissolve, evaporating into tendrils of smoke, swept away by the united force behind the prophet. The conflict renewed its intensity, but rather than falter, the vibrant light surged like a tidal wave. People felt the heat of hope flood through them, hands grasping at one another, drawing strength and power from their unity. And as they let the light shine through, they kicked the shadows back deeper into the abyss, terrifying claws clutching at vapor, losing form, dissolving into mere echoes. One final push, one glorious cry, and then the darkness erupted into brilliant shards of light, scattering about them like fireworks in the night sky. Silence followed, not born of defeat, but of triumph. Gasp after gasp filled the air as the veil of shadows receded, revealing a sky painted in hues of garish hope. The crowd stood together, breathless but alive, hearts pounding with the power of change. The prophet raised his hands, bringing them together in gratitude, tears of relief streaming down his face. "We have chosen our path," he cried. "From this day forth, We know the light rests within us. With the shadows driven back and a beautiful dawn breaking, the people embraced one another. Families, friends, and strangers united. The luminous woman smiled, eyes bright with shared joy, a beacon in this new beginning. As they looked into each other's faces, they saw strength where once there was fear, a bond unbreakable now, forged in their collective triumph over darkness. Remember this day, the prophet urged, voice reverberating through their hearts. Together, we will heal. Together we will grow. Never forget how strong we are when we stand united. And with smiles lighting the dawn, they stepped away from the abyss, embracing their new fate, a fate carved by their strength, love, and the undeniable light within. But before they could celebrate, a chilling wind swept through the crowd, unsettling the air. The shadows might have fled, but each heartbeat bore the echo of vigilance, a reminder that the battle for their hopes was never truly over. And somewhere, far into the horizon, the whispers of darkness still lingered, waiting for the chance to return. But now they fought, not with fear, but with courage, ready to face whatever lay ahead. If you're moved by this powerful story, you need to subscribe now so you don't miss the next exclusive revelations. Smash that like button now to feed the algorithm and show your love. Flood the comments with your thoughts on this dynamic conclusion. And if you know friends who need to see this extraordinary journey, share this with at least 5 people. Don't let them miss out. This is the moment to show your support.